So welcome everyone to today's Midnight training session, taking a look at Midnight's inventory functionality. Today we'll cover how to set up your warehouse, how to create new inventory items, how to receive inventory for existing and for new items. And we'll also take a look at inventory transactions such as adding, subtracting, moving, and adjusting. We'll also look at some documentation generation, such as how to create a packing slip or a pickup/delivery ticket. And we'll look at some functionality with how the inventory app that's compatible with iPhones and iDevices ties into Midnight's inventory system. You may or may not have the inventory app on your particular Midnight account, so I'll briefly go over that, and I'll have a separate session dedicated to full use of the application in the future. Finally, we'll be taking a look at some reports for inventory tracking, both within the reports module and within the item records themselves. Before anything, I'm going to take a brief look at our admin menu to go over some of the core functionality options that we can set our drop-down menus and default, such as default locations to. To start things up, I'll take a look at our global settings. Under here, you have the ability to set up deduction methods based on whether or not you mark your job as being shipped, mark your job as being closed, or simply want to deduct all of your inventory based on being within a particular version of a particular job. If you don't handle versioning within Midnight and you simply do all of your work based on single version jobs, that is still considered a version in this case. And by checking this version box, you can deduct inventory entirely from within a job by simply clicking the deduct box. The other methods, such as actual drop date and close date, are automatic based on the date plugin. So be careful when deducting inventory manually or when using the application, and also utilizing the automatic feature, as you can deduct inventory against an order multiple times this way. Under the inventory tab of our global settings, we also have the option to display inventory subs link on orders. Within inventory records, you can set items to have substitutions or alternative versions that will qualify in the situation where you may not have enough of a specific item to fulfill your needs. By default, this feature is disabled, but you can enable it if you would like. Also within inventory records, you can set up reorder points. If your inventory falls below a specific quantity, an email will go out to the email address or addresses added here to let you know that the quantity of your item has fallen below a certain point and that you will need to reorder a specified amount of that particular item, which is a quantity that you define within your inventory record. Emails can be added in here more than once, or you can have multiple email accounts, but they need to be separated by comma, not comma space. Additionally, within the admin menu, towards the bottom, you'll see the warehouse expandable list. Under here, this is where you set up your locations. And after you set up your locations of your warehouses, you can set up default receiving locations within each warehouse, such as a specific bay, or location, or section, or shelf. The core information here comes from the locations pop-out. This list can be populated based on your sections, bays, shelves, as well as the list of default sizes, location types, the warehouses that your locations are at, and whether or not they're active. If you need to add a new instance of a location, you can simply type in the name in the bottom of the gray container. Selecting the information within the drop-downs that correspond. And click the Save button after making sure it's active, so that way you know that it is selected as a location. To add information to any of these core areas, such as the section, bay, or shelf handlers, just like I did here, you can add your information to the bottom of the list to add a new instance, as long as the active box is checked for the display of it being active. Additionally, if you wish to sort and search for data, such as your warehouse locations, you can type in your particular fields information you'd like to have sorted by a beginning with. You'll have a filter applied that pulls up data only relevant to what it is that you select. To clear this, you can simply hit the clear filter to reset your sort options. And if you need to get rid of any choices that you have added, you can simply either click the X button to delete it, or adjust the location to set the active status to inactive. Additionally, under the Warehouse submenu is the Item Types list. Under here, you can add any of your item types that you would classify your inventory as. Do note that if you wish to have any inventory utilized for your wide format print calculator, the item type needs to begin with the WF identified here in the item type name. Much like how you see as my paper dash roll or paper dash full instances, you can set your materials such as WF dash vinyl, WF dash canvas, etc. So that way they'll be available on the wide format calculator. You can also set user-defined fields, which correspond to fields that aren't already in our system that you may find valuable. Within the items, you can set up to 30 instances. To add a new instance of a field, you can simply click the Edit button, give your field a label name, a format of which it needs to adhere to, an input mask, which is an available list of choices, or a pre-selected text such as select, and a field size to determine how many characters can actually fit within the confines of this container. Like our other boxes, if we leave the active box checked, it becomes active, and if we uncheck it, it is considered inactive and hidden from all views. There's also an item request list of user-defined fields, and this as well has up to 30 available. You can also have inventory items within a vendor record or a purchase orders item contain user-defined fields, both of which allow up to 30. Finally, under the admin menu, you have the reason codes. Under here, if you're adjusting your inventory, for instance, by count adjustment, you can pick the reason for the adjustment out of the drop-down list populated by these. So to get into your inventory module, You simply click Warehouse at the top, and you're brought to your inventory search screen, which retains a filter based on anything that you've done a search for in the past. You can click the funnel icon to change the method of filtration for whatever it is that you're typing within a particular container. By default, pretty much all of the fields are considered begins with. So the customer name is the only option that is a contains field. To clear your filters, you can click the reset button here, of course. Do note that this does clear your active filter, so you will see all inactive and active inventory. And you'll need to reset this to active equal yes to get back to what is considered the default inventory view. Any item records you've visited already can be accessed quickly in a top 10 list by expanding your recently viewed list on the left. Otherwise, to get into an item, you can click any one of the blue text instances for a particular item. If instead of creating an item, you wish to receive or modify the contents of it, you can do that from this screen as well by right-clicking the item and hitting either Add, Move, or Subtract. Alternatively, you can do this from within the item record. Lastly, if you want to take advantage of the extended search options, by clicking Extended Search, you're given a list which allows you to change some of your search methods. The user-defined fields 1, 2, and 3 actually give you up to 3 user-defined fields to search for. These are not specifically locked to user-defined fields 1, 2, and 3. You can also search by inventory that may be in a particular location, or by the customer code rather than the customer name. So if we take a look at our inventory list, we can see 20 instances per page, and all of our pagination allows us to proceed down a list and access any other inventory that we need. And as a quick disclaimer, the quantity refers to the on-hand or available count of the inventory that we have on either shelves or just in any general location. So if we take a look at one of our items, for instance, we'll look at an in-house sheet. We see the item header is given core information such as the customer it's associated with, the item's type, again populated by the admin list, the item code, which is a unique value that must always be unique when adding a new item, the item name, description, and customer part numbers, which for documentation purposes can vary based on whatever you need them to display. The creation date, which is the date that the item was entered into your system. Also the version number, expiration date, lot, kit, and discontinued options, which are completely optional and simply data references. The active checkbox determines whether or not your item is active. If you wish to deactivate your item or quote-unquote delete the item, this is the only way that you can achieve such results. And the global checkbox makes it so that an item can be available for use on any customer's job rather than just their own. This affects the inventory lists on the print calculator within estimates and orders, as well as the inventory tab within an order. If you do carry an in-house stock, we typically suggest having the global box checked, so that way it's available for anybody. Lastly, in the header, we have the item ID. This is a value generated on our side, which ties into our inventory app, our iPad or iPhone compatible device, which is used for inventory tracking, receiving, creation, and relocation. We have no reports that directly reference or display this field, but it is utilized for tracking purposes and also API connectivity. So this cannot be adjusted, but is not necessary for any of your searches that would go into getting items on jobs or other locations. Under the details, you have your UPC code, lead time days, per container count, digital asset, serialized, and print on demand, which are all simple data values and don't necessarily pertain to anything related to expense tracking or documentation. You also have the unit of measure, which allows you to track and control how you're ordering your inventory. Your unit value, which is a per piece cost, or what we would assume that would be your purchase cost of the item itself. The reorder point, which if greater than 0, allows you to have the system send out emails to the email accounts outlined in the global settings list with instruction to order the reorder quantities worth of that particular item. You also have the PO item checkbox, which determines whether or not purchase orders and vendors can have this item associated with them. For instance, if you have a vendor that you commonly order goods from, maybe a stock, envelope, or sheet, roll, count, whatever you'd like to order, the PO item allows you to, when checked, select that item and list it as one of the purchased items for that particular vendor. After this, you can set that item to your purchase orders. Lastly, in the screen, the print job date, print job quantity, all of these values below reorder quantity are the user-defined fields that you've added in yourself. And the comments field is simply a text container. You can also add an image to your item, which will display on anything as far as a work order or within the inventory application as an item's picture or record. This, of course, isn't necessary, but is useful to track differences of particular items, so that way your team, when going to grab in the production warehouse, know what they're looking for if they don't already know what they're grabbing. We also have the paper details. Under here, we have a breakout of information such as parent sheet length, width, basis weight, M weight. We have the cost per 1,000 sheets, markup, lots of options. All these fields correspond to whether or not your sheet or roll can be made available on the print calculator. To make sure that your item is present on there, it's required that your material type be selected as either a sheet or a roll to determine if it's compatible with the press that you're running your print calculation with. The finish, opacity, brightness, and grade are options which can be controlled in the admin list and can be taken advantage of within the print calculator's advanced inventory filter process. So that way you can get the most accurate item that you need for any particular job if you don't know what you're looking for by name. The sheet length and width determine the bounds of the sheet itself to determine if it can actually fit within any of your presses. And the cost per 1,000 sheets is what's utilized within the print estimation system to determine the costing. You can also utilize the paper markup to track your costing as well within the calculator. The weight per square feet and cost per square feet is utilized within our wide format calculator. And for ink tracking and expenses on offset press jobs, the cover and text bubbles are used to identify how much ink is required, which adjusts how much time is utilized for the press itself, and also how much ink is used for the expense tracking of the ink. Under quantities, we can see our on-hand, reserved, and available counts. On hand lets us know what we have that is not yet tied to another order. The reserved is the sum of all counts of this particular item on all open orders. And the available simply shows the difference between what we have on hand and what's actually reserved. In this case, we can see that we've placed over 620,000 counts of this sheet on a job that we don't actually have. When an order is closed, the reserved count drops based on whatever the quantity of the item was found within the inventory tab of that job. Under the locations tab, you'll see a record of all locations and quantities of each location for this particular item as it's distributed across your different warehouses. Take a look at this one to see some examples. Under the Receipts tab, anytime you've received an item using our Receive Item module, the receipt will show up here to indicate when you acquired it and the user that had delivered it. And under the Transactions tab, you'll see a history of every transaction that has crossed an item since the time it's added to the system. This list is in descending order with most recent occurring first. So we can either look at our reports or this particular screen to determine why our quantities may equal whatever they are at the moment. Under substitutes is where you can add the alternative items that can qualify as a sub for a specific item. By default, these are all blank and disabled unless you enable a feature within the admin menu. And finally, under lots, these are the different shipments of the same inventory item record, where each shipment can have a different piece cost, or could be produced by a different vendor and can have different expiration dates. If you do wish to use our lot tracking, under the global settings menu, you'll need to enable either last in, first out, or first in, first out operations. And you can add counts by clicking the Add New Lot button to plug in the info that's related to the particular item. Under the quick links, we do have the options to add, subtract, move, or adjust the inventory counts. Under here, the item is default selected. We can pick the location that we'd like to stick our item. We can also tie it to a specific order to make it unavailable for other orders. We can tie it to a lot if our item has lots associated. And we can plug a quantity in to show how much more of that particular item we're getting. At this point now I can see that I have a transaction showing that I've added 25,000 sheets of this particular item. I have a date stamp and timestamp, no order associated with it, and my VS user account is the one that added this. I'll also see that in my staging location, I have an additional 25,000 available. And under my quantities, I can see that I have the total sum equal to the count of all of my locations. Alternatively, if we wish to move our inventory or adjust our inventory, we can do so from here. Moving is, as you would expect, selecting the location in which you have a current count at and putting it somewhere different. You can move partials or full. The quantity does not default based on however much is at a particular location. Within the adjustment screen, you can use this to adjust your counts. For instance, if after doing monthly or quarterly inventory audits, if you find that your counts are slightly different from what you would expect them to be, you can change the on-hand balance by coming in here and placing in the either addition or subtraction to whatever it is you need it to be changed by. In this case, I can say my 25,000 counts of this item needs to be 24,500 because of maybe we are resetting our on-hand balance. You are always given the option to let you know that you are changing your quantity and that you'll have to confirm it to OK. And after this, you'll see that you have under your locations, quantities, and transactions list a log of everything that was done here. And if comments are added, why? Finally, under subtract, you can do exactly what you'd expect. You can pull inventory from your system. If instead of doing an adjustment, you'd simply like to do a subtraction, that's fine. Alternatively, you can pull inventory against an order by selecting that order from the dropdown. And then when you look at your transactions list, you'll see that you've pulled the X amount that you've selected for this particular job, which will show as a deduction against it in any of your deduction and inventory expense reports. So if we leave here and take a look at the quick links within the item search screen, we'll see that we have the ability to receive an item, which is also this green button here. Or you can use the new inventory item to create a new item in this case. Now you can also create an item from within an order by entering the order, and within the quick links of the order, selecting the quick add inventory button, which will subsequently create an item under the inventory tab. The customer is defaulted to the customer of the order. Everything else is blank but required in the header, except for the item description, name, and customer part number. If we were to associate our item as a sheet or roll, we can select the information here to pick and choose how it can accommodate for a print calculator. If that's not the case, then we can just pick and choose some default information of our item, such as the value, unit of measure, whether or not it's available globally, and other just general information regarding it. This is not a way to add inventory to your system in terms of adding quantities of that item. This is simply a way to get the inventory into your system for data usage. Now, once again, if I look in the job, if I take a look at my reports, I can see that of the 4 items I have selected, any of my work order reports will list them. And if there's an image associated with that item, it'll be available on here, as well as a breakdown of all the locations that the item resides in and quantities of that item in each location. The barcode that's under the item ID is utilized with our eye scanning system or the inventory app, and pictures if necessary. If you go back into the warehouse, we can see the item itself may have a picture associated with it. And if not, we can add a new one by clicking Choose File and selecting a JPEG, PNG, or GIF file. And in our reports, we can print off item labels, which will include the picture if there's a picture associated, or just a tag that can be printed out. A receipt history to show any counts of the item that has been received. A skid flag for the item. Or a transaction audit list, which shows a simple breakdown of adjustments, additions, and subtractions made for this particular item within a specific date range. If you need to receive an item, then by clicking the Receive Item button, you're given the option to pick and choose who you're receiving the item against, the job or purchase order that you're receiving the item from, and any other details, comments, or deliver by information as necessary. If you select a purchase order that has inventory associated with it, and the PO has items already on that exist in the system, the items down below will populate to show you a list of any items that there are that you can place into your system. If not, you can always add the items as necessary, place in the quantity, and break out the quantity based on however much is in a container. Noting that this does need to add up, otherwise the item itself won't allow you to add a record for this case. Under here, you can prematurely print a skid flag or an inventory receipt. Or after you assign and put away the goods, you'll be prompted to print one immediately. Because we listed that we had 10 containers in this case, we have the option of selecting 10 different locations to place the items at, along with the quantities per container, and any comments associated with it. And you'll see this for all items associated with the item receive. Under our inventory reports, we can take a look at the item reports, which are available within the item itself. You can take a look at the inventory reports, which is a full list of reports that we have associated with the inventory records. Or we can take a look at the inventory receipt reports and try to pull information according based on everything that we've just done records on. Typically, the inventory receipt reports are only needed to be accessed within their respective receipt module, and the same goes with items. But you do have the ability to get some information out of here that you wouldn't normally be able to get from their respective modules, such as the vendor list, which shows all items associated with the vendor and their prices. Lastly, under the inventory reports, a quick breakdown of the reports that we have. The available inventory report, which shows the raw counts of the items, which can be grouped by customer, defaulting to a show all option. Billing detail and summary reports, which allow you to track expenses related to ordering your inventory. Your daily inventory receipts report, which shows a summary of all receipts based on a specific date range. The expired inventory report, which, as expected, shows all of your unused inventory based on the expiration date populated within the item's header. The inventory inactive report, which shows your inventory as it has not been used within a certain time range. The inventory reorder and inventory reorder by availability reports, which let you know which items have fallen below the reorder point and need to be reordered. The inventory reports parent, child, or child only, which allow you to associate parent-child relationships to your customer records to determine what items are available for that particular customer or group of customers. Our stock inventory report by customer, which is similar to the child-only report, but simply lists the quantities. The inventory slot locations, which is a full list of your locations list and the quantities of all goods within them. A big report here, the inventory transaction detail report, which shows a breakdown of every historical action made against any of your inventory within the system within a date range. All the comments of mobile indicate that these were made using our inventory app. If there are no comments, then the item was added using just the standard method of simple addition through the system without using the inventory app. The inventory value and inventory value by lot reports, which show how much you have in terms of value of the goods sitting in your warehouse. The item labels report, which allows you to print item labels either by item ID specific or en masse. Location tags, which are similar to item labels, they allow you to print location tags to place onto your locations for our barcode scanning system. An inventory-based packing slip, which is available and allows you to tie in for your item requests see any of your goods that you have associated with the packing slip for the day. A paper order report to let you know requirements for what needs to be ordered for specific jobs. If you've got reserved inventory that has not yet been deducted. A physical count by slot location, which much like the inventory slot locations report, shows the counts of all items within cells of locations. Difference being that this report actually shows the items, whereas the slot locations only shows that there are counts greater than 0 within the location. The pickup delivery summary report, which is a stock available to you. It allows you to see a history of any pickup or delivery orders that you've placed and what has happened with them. And the yearly item status report, which shows activity of an item within a specific year for a particular customer. Depending on how many orders you've done in your system or how many transactions are made against it, you have quite a lot of information. So this report does usually take a few seconds to load compared to the others. That pretty much covers the core functionality of inventory within Midnight's inventory handling system, how to get it onto your jobs, how to track it via reporting, and how to monitor its quantities and adjust them as necessary. I'll be covering purchase order inventory handling in the purchase order session, which will be my next training session next week, as well as handling inventory movement through the item request system. With all that being said, we'll call today an end, and we'll open things up for Q&A.